Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. I will want to show you something quite amazing today from the Society of the Spectacle, from the book Society of the Spectacle of Guy Debord. We already spoke about it yesterday, about Society of the Spectacle, but this is really, really very, very profound, what he's saying. And of course, like I mentioned yesterday, we came to a very interesting point in human society in which somehow the ideas of Guy Debord, which is considered extreme radical leftism, are somehow aligned and are become very useful for the policies of the current administration of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And it's a very, very interesting occurrence in which two of the biggest, how would I say, billionaires, tycoons in the world find common ground and a common understanding together with Guy Debord. So it's unbelievable times that we live in. Yes, as I say, as I say, that if you will make a whole round around the world, you will eventually come back to the place where you are. So I guess that if you go all the way to the left, you get from communism, you get to capitalism, vice versa. So it's a very interesting observation that we see here, especially in view of what we will hear today. Really extremely profound things from Guy Debord. I will be reading from chapter 108 in the Society of the Spectacle. Don't be frightened. The book is very short, actually. Society of the Spectacle is a short book, but the chapters are divided into some of them just into a few sentences. So it sounds maybe long, but 108 is not long. 108 is... there's no pages. Okay, so it's from part 4 of the Society of the Spectacle, the proletariat as subject and as representation. Yes. So let's see why we're listening to this now, because this issue became very present due to the statements of the current administration. So let's listen to that again.
Say, what is the goal of Doge, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy. And if you looked at this, if you looked at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix.
Okay, I find this statement, this recording, absolutely remarkable, and in summary, Elon Musk is warning from the rulership of an unelected bureaucratic dictatorship that has formed within the administrations in the West, in the United States and also in other countries. And he says this is no longer a democracy when a bureaucratic dictatorship is ruling from behind the scenes. And yesterday we studied a bit about the sources of this bureaucratic dictatorship based on the philosophical observations of Guy Debord. No, it's not really philosophical, it's really very analytic observations of Guy Debord, really fascinating in the Society of the Spectacle. Said that usually this book is censored in the way it is presented, and it's presented as if the whole point of the Society of the Spectacle is that Guy Debord, the lefty communist, explains that Western society is just a spectacle, and when you go to Instagram or you go to Facebook or you share I don't know what you just bought and so on, this is all spectacle and this is not reality TV or whatever, and that's the summary of his criticism. And we saw that this is actually fake. It's not true. It's not what is written in the book. The book is actually a criticism and a warning exactly against this development of the bureaucratic dictatorship. And what intellectuals like Guy Debord were trying to warn us already in 1967 is about exactly the kind of challenges that we are facing in 2025. But one of the reasons that we couldn't hear these warnings is because the institutions that were supposed to channel this, the institutions from which we expected to give us this intellectual, how would I say, content, right? The intellectual content, and deliver to society exactly these ideas, by themselves got conquered by the bureaucratic dictatorship. And by here I mean the academy, I mean also religious institutions, but in general, yeah. And the point that I'm trying to make is that the intellectuals have, throughout the years, have had a lot to say about this, but we think they have nothing to say because it was channeled to us in a wrong and distorted manner. And once the message is given in a proper way, we see how valuable it can be. And that is why rehabilitation and correction of the universities, of the academy, of finding what was really tried to be said by the intellectuals, not through distorted channel, is extremely important. So that's what we're trying to do in this channel, and this channel is sort of an underground, okay? Because in the official channels you will not hear that, and soon you will see why. So what I want to show you today is chapter 108 from Society of the Spectacle, and it's absolutely mind-blowing what Guy Debord already identified in 1967, probably because, as he explained in the previous sections of the Society of the Spectacle, this bureaucratic dictatorship was not born out of nowhere. It didn't just materialize. It's not some sort of conspiracy theory or something that came from outer space. It has historical roots. And the historical roots of the bureaucratic dictatorship is originally from Soviet Russia. It doesn't mean that it is a communist thing. It doesn't mean that it is necessarily a Soviet thing or it's necessarily a conscious thing. It's like a virus that was developed at this time from the special historical circumstances that originated in after the communist revolution in Russia, that the Russians learned intuitively, spontaneously, as a communal society, right? It's not a conscious thing within society, to erect this kind of bureaucracy. And from there, it traveled to other countries. It traveled to the West. Okay, this kind of rulership over the people, if you want, you can see it in other broadcasts. But this thing was really originated in Soviet Russia. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily just Soviets. That's why we see it also in the United States. It's when a lot of people come together and they create a certain falsehood of the bureaucracy, a facade, a spectacle of government. Okay, they create a spectacle of government. It's like, you see it in nature, for instance, that sometimes you see packs of fish. And the fish themselves are not predatory, they're very weak fish. But they come together and the pack itself looks to other fish from the outside like it's a shark or like it's a whale. And then they don't attack it because they're afraid from all the fish together, this whole little pack of fish, they look like a shark. But by themselves, they are not predatory fish. The bureaucracy is something like that. They create a spectacle of power, an illusion of power, that this power grows out of the falsehood of their own sort of false unity. It's not real unity, it's not real mutual guarantee, it's a sect, it's a certain priesthood that come together and in a sort of a process of spectacle, of a mass hallucination, create the bureaucratic government. Yes? And they unite together on the basis of the fact that once they are united, they can supposedly get for themselves a bit more than they would have gotten if they would have been by themselves. So actually, it's a unity of weakness, very weak elements within society. Anyway, this way or the other, let's start reading because you will see what Guy Debord is touching upon here is really profound ideas. Let's start watching. Okay, so Society of the Spectacle. You see, Guy Debord, 1967. Let's go. 108. Okay. When an ideology, having become absolute through the possession of absolute power, changes from partial knowledge into totalitarian falsehood, the thought of history is so perfectly annihilated that history itself, even at the level of the most empirical knowledge, can no longer exist. So Debord is saying something absolutely mind-blowing here in this sentence, and I will explain. He's saying the following thing. Eventually, the bureaucratic institutions assimilate, they amass absolute power. They amass really tremendous amounts of power. And when they do that, when history reaches to a point in which the bureaucratic institutions amass this level of control of power, they start like in the galaxies, when there's a star that becomes too big, it starts crumbling into itself, starts collapsing into itself, and creates a black hole. The bureaucratic institutions, the bureaucratic dictatorships, they do exactly that. They actually start to annihilate their own history. Again, they start to annihilate history itself. Okay, so in a bureaucratic society like ours, like the one we are trying to get out from, what we are seeing Musk and Trump trying to do, and getting the power elected in the United States to do this, is like trying to take the whole Western society out from a black hole. The black holes are the bureaucratic institutions, the big bureaucratic dictatorship has created. And this black hole leads to the elimination of history. So you'd say, what do you mean elimination of history? Everybody in our society can go and read a book, right? Technically, we can go and read books. the information is available. We can go to Wikipedia, we can go to Google, we can go and check everything. It's not like we live in Soviet Russia, right? Because when we read, like, for instance, dystopian books, like, I don't know, 1984, or A Brave New World, right? Fahrenheit 541, then really there, the institutions, they burn books, right? So you cannot get history books. But in our society, supposedly, everything is available, right? It's not entirely so. Because just the fact that the information exists doesn't mean that the history is, first of all, an organic, living history that people are aware and conscious of. And second of all, it doesn't mean that it is exactly presented in an objective, empirical manner. And this is something we know very well in our channel, and I will soon give a few examples. But the fact of the matter is that we definitely see this process in occurrence, but it occurs in a much more camouflaged, in a much more subtle way than one would expect if you read, I don't know, 1984 by George Orwell, or you read Fahrenheit 541. No books are burnt, but yet history is annihilated. History in the communal conscious of the people is not officially accepted. It becomes not even fluid. It becomes so untangible, institutionally untangible, that it is really the official stance of the bureaucratic government that there's no real history. History is not real. There's narratives. There's no real history around. And this is a very, very dangerous situation. Okay, yeah, and it says even on empirical things, on empirical manners, the bureaucratic society will try to fight against history. Now, why would the bureaucratic? What is the motivation of the bureaucratic society to eliminate history? Because you see, the bureaucratic, I will try to explain, and we will get to this. The bureaucratic dictatorship derives its power from authority. The authority of little people. History is not little. History is very big. There can always be surprises in history. So for the bureaucratic dictatorship, history is bad for business. Any kind of an attempt to give content to the ongoing human existence since, I don't know, long time ago, is now presented as a threat to the bureaucratic dictatorship, because it's made from little people. So you see, even if they have power over the universities, if they have power over the academy and so on, they will not encourage the study of history. On the contrary, they will develop a version of history which is the most superficial that one could have. And they will divert people from actually studying properly history. If you want to study history, it will be the most shallow history that you can have. Okay? And I will try to show you and explain to you that this process is actually occurring. It's occurring. You don't see it in front of you, but it's actually the official stance of the bureaucratic institutions. And by bureaucratic institutions, in this case, I mean the universities have in the last few years developed a version of historical studies that is completely non-historical. History is actually properly exempt from the universities today. You cannot properly learn history. So you see, the majority of the population have no history. They are completely infused by media, and the media that they are encouraged to consume is on the best has a memory of one day, because when you consume news, you consume media, the news are always news. There's only a present, right? There's no history in the news. You're constantly brainwashed on what happened today. What happened yesterday is already old news. So the attention span of society is being pushed in such a way, the dictatorial, bureaucratic dictatorships, via the media, to make sure that the historical attention span of the majority of the society is no longer than one day old. Moreover, if certain individuals in society do want to learn history, the history that they will learn in the universities is very washed out. It is extremely superficial, and this superficiality has been developed only in the last few years. Let me show you a few examples, okay? So, one of the most famous, and it sadly for my country is a disgrace to my country, voices, in history today, in historical studies, is Yuval Noah Harari. Right? Let's see what is his views of history. What will happen what will happen when you go to study history today, right, in the universities? Which kind of history are you marketed with? And you see, what I'm actually claiming is that pseudo-intellectuals like Yuval Noah Harari, they are marketed. Yuval Noah Harari is marketed by Bill Gates. He's marketed by Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. He's marketed by a lot of people that are exactly the bureaucratic dictatorship, right? They're exactly this class that Guy Debord is warning for. And look what kind of history is the market for you. Because you see, let's see how history is being taught by the bureaucratic institutions. Let's see this.
Dear colleagues and guests, on behalf of Bazaar Forlag and the Science Library, I'm delighted to have you all here for the public lecture of Professor Yuval Harari. And before we listen to him, I'll give the word to Professor Jørn Hurum, who was the one who took the initiative to invite Harari here when he heard...
Okay. Let's a bit...
And it's not often that I read a popular science book completely and like it. Mostly I end about halfway. But this was a book that was sent to me by the publisher, and I didn't know anything about it, but I started to read. And I read, and I read, and I read.
Okay.
Talk a lot.
Thanks for the introduction and the invitation, and for everybody who came to hear this talk about ourselves, about our species, about humankind, how we conquered the planet. If we go back around 70,000 years, then we find that our ancestors, Homo sapiens, that lived in East Africa back then, were insignificant animals. The most important thing you need to know about our ancestors is that they were unimportant animals.
Okay, well, you get the drift of this, right? And let's see a bit of the marketing that Yuval Noah Harari enjoys from. Okay, so for instance, let's see what Obama has to say about him.
Yes, okay.
So let's see what the
other book that I really enjoyed, a book by an Israeli author, Yuval Harari, called *Sapiens*, and it's a sweeping history of the human race.
Okay, you see, it's really quite remarkable, because Obama is the biggest, is the symbol of the bureaucratic dictatorship, right? He's the poster boy for the bureaucratic dictatorship. And let's see, look how much he likes and actually advocates this book. Why? Debord explains us why. Because this book is supposedly a history book, but it erases human history altogether. There's no more human history. We're a species, we're part of the animal world, we're insignificant, and we developed like a form of science. History is now erased, and I will explain you why. So let's listen.
From 40,000 feet. And part of what makes it so interesting and provocative is that because it's such a condensed, sweeping history, it talks about some core things that have allowed us to build this extraordinary civilization. It goes back to keeping the long view in mind.
So you see, it's absolutely remarkable because the bureaucratic dictatorship markets this book. It markets this book. It markets this type of supposed pseudoscience that is part of its way of dominating people's minds. Okay? Erasing history. I will soon explain, but you see, okay, so here you see Obama marketing this book. Let's see Bill Gates lately marketing Yuval Noah Harari. They all together market here. Bill Gates' major endorsement of transhumanist technocrat Yuval Noah Harari. Let's look at
Holidays are a great time to read new books. Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He's a really strong thinker. He makes it clear that big problems, they're not solvable by a single country.
Okay, so you see, it's really unbelievable because Debord told us already in 1967, the bureaucratic dictatorship will be interested in erasing history. And we, since we all read Fahrenheit 541, are expecting the flamethrowers, right? We're expecting them to be burning books. No, they are not burning books. They're writing them. Only that they're writing and advertising and marketing the books that they want you to read. And by that, erasing history. So what is the best way to erase history? The best way to erase history is to take a person, make him a professor of history, giving him the highest rank within academy, marketing him, and then you will not listen to anybody else. You will go to listen to him. You will go to study from him, and he becomes the high priest of history. Now you see, the doctrine of Yuval Noah Harari is exactly what Debord is warning for, because in Yuval Noah Harari's history there is no history. There is no details. Like Obama said, he's looking at history from 40,000 miles high, right? It's a history with no history. So you actually want to go to the university, you want to go learn history, study history, but you're being taught about Homo sapiens, the history of Homo sapiens. It has no details. There's no longer, you will go to the academy, you will go to study history, but they will tell you we are studying it from an ultra-modern point of view. There's no longer Napoleon, there's no longer Genghis Khan, there's no longer, Julius Caesar, the history of the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. There's no longer medieval history, there's no longer history of the Middle East, there's no longer details, all these details are not important anymore. We are now categorically thinking about history from a bird's view. We are looking at the history of Homo sapiens. And you see, Debord tells us that these recommendations of books, of history books that you are getting from Bill Gates, that you're getting from Obama, that you're getting from Klaus Schwab, you're getting from the World Economic Forum, are not a coincidence. It's not that they really went to a bookshop and said, maybe I will recommend Alice in Wonderland or Cat in the Hat of Dr. Seuss or Yuval Noah Harari. I need to choose from 3 of my favorite books. No, there's no coincidence here. It is part of the dictatorship. It's part of the bureaucratic dictatorship. This taste of theirs in history books is not coincidental. And remarkably, we know this very well because you see, probably from my voice or from my accent, or more probably from looking at this YouTube channel, you can see that I come from Israel. Now, Israel, of course, is it's really paradoxical, right? Because Yuval Noah Harari actually comes from Israel. Whether you like it or not, the country of Israel, the nation, the Jewish nation, has quite a long history, right? It has quite an old history, but remarkably, in our institutions, the leading figure of the historical discussion in the academy in Israel, in the Hebrew University in Israel, is somebody that is erasing all of this history. And this is part of the reason is that Israel is today, like in the United States, in America, the situation with Musk and Trump and the rise of the bureaucratic dictatorship. Israel is currently, like many other countries in the West, is very infested by the bureaucratic dictatorship, including within the academic institutions. Now, don't get me wrong. When I mention Israel here, it's not out of a certain nationalistic, confrontation between globalism and nationalism or any kind of this sort, or any kind of patriotism that I miss people teaching specifically Jewish history or Israeli history. It's just an example for the tension between the history, the way it looked like 30 years ago. Clearly, if you would have came to the academy in Israel 30 years ago, you would have studied completely different thing, right? To the way it is today. And today, the academic institutions have been conquered to such a way that the history of the Roman Empire is not in the forefront of history. The history of the French Revolution, or the history of the Middle East in the Arab times, or the history of the Second Temple in the Israel-Palestinian area, whatever, is not in the forefront. Now, this is a remarkable thing, and the point is that historical studies are a threat to the institution of the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy can only rule out of shallowness. And once people learn about history, they are much more prepared to understand to see beyond the veil of the current administrations. Again, truly studying history is a very dangerous thing for the bureaucratic institutions, because the bureaucratic institutions oblige that the people that they rule over will be, in the large majority of the masses, will be the more shallow than they are, and they are the most shallow people in the world. Knowledge is power, and they definitely do not want this power entrusted within the hands of the population. So you see, what happens is that people go and think that they study from people like Yuval Noah Harari, they think that they are, but actually they do not study knowledge. What they study is the opposite of knowledge. They are not liberated by what they study. On the contrary, they study their own demise, because they are willing to give up on the whole of human history and the knowledge and the communal accumulated experience of the sort of so-called human species, the Homo sapiens, throughout thousands of years, and entrust it in the hands of Yuval Noah Harari to tell you that it is unimportant. Why do you need to know how Napoleon fought his wars? How the Roman Empire handled its citizens? because you can learn from it for today. Or, for instance, on the American Civil War. Now, remarkably, in our channel, we explore this very far because, as I said, I personally live in the Middle East, and the historical questions regarding the history of the Middle East are of tremendous importance for us. So I've been engaging in making a broadcast from a specific book, not just from this book, but from many many other occurrences we have observed this. One of these books is a book by an historian. His name is Debord and Yehudit Koren, two historians, two Israeli historians. And to our amazement, this book was completely boycotted. It's persona non grata within the not just the Israeli Academy, but in the Western Academy. It was written in the 90s after long archaeological excavations here in Israel by Debord. And the book is mind-blowing. It is a book about the history of the Middle East. Now, and I'm just giving it as an example for the annihilation of history. All backed up by archaeological discoveries. And it completely changes our view of the history of the Middle East. And just to make a clarification, as I said before, the point here is not a certain nationalistic Israeli agenda. On the contrary, if you will read the book Crossroads to Islam by Debord and Yehudit Koren, you will see that it is maybe the only book in the world that has an overview of Palestinian history, to such a depth as this book. Palestinian history, our Palestinian history. In this sense, I'm not just expecting universities in Israel to study this book. I will be encouraging this book to be studied in universities in Ramallah. Okay, so it's not like a Israeli-Palestinian confrontation or whatever. It's really a book about the history of the Middle East. And to our amazement, every day we are reading this book. It's already in broadcast 92. We already have 92 broadcasts on this specific book, and it's mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing history of the Middle East. And the current institutions completely block any kind of dissemination of this information. To the level that we can say really that not just in Israel, in Israel, in the West, in the East, wherever, the true history, empirical, like Debord says, it's empirical facts. You cannot deny it. You cannot deny archaeological discoveries that are presented to you, backed up by evidence, right? And even though it's empirical discoveries, it's eliminated. It's not it's science that is censored science. And I can give many other examples. The history here of the region of the Jewish nation and everything around is a very old, long history. But it is written in such a way today and presented in such a way today that we cannot call and refer to the way it is presented to the general public as exactly true. Okay? And of course, you understand the political implications of this. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most charged conflicts in the world. I don't need to tell you. And it's not just charged. It is a centerpiece of the dominance of the bureaucratic dictatorship. It's one of its centerpieces. It's a very central feature of the current political world order. So making a change in the way in which society views the history of the region is not good for business for the bureaucratic dictatorship, right? So it's not surprising that they will be actively rewriting the history of the region in order to make such a version of the history that will perpetuate conflicts. Okay? Resolving conflicts through a true understanding of the history is not good for the bureaucracy. And again, the bureaucracy is not a conscious force here. It is a collective spectacle of the general population, of a certain sect within society that are by themselves not really conscious to what they are doing, because they are by themselves quite ignorant. You see, even a professor like Yuval Noah Harari, you think he's conscious to the fact that to what he's doing? I'm not sure, because in truth he's quite ignorant. I don't think you can properly sit with him to a conversation about the history of the Roman Empire, or the level of the way that you should have been able to sit with a professor of history 50 years ago. I don't think so. I don't think he properly knows the history of the Roman Empire. I don't think he properly knows the history of Israel. I don't think he properly knows the history of the French Revolution. On the level that was required for not just a professor 50 years ago, for a basic student, a graduate student in history. I'm not sure. The bureaucracy nurtures and develops stupid people, uneducated people, as an interest, as a political interest, as an ideology. It's an ideology. They don't need to burn books. They just need to burn your will to educate yourself. The totalitarian bureaucratic society lives in a perpetual present, where everything that happened exists for it only as a place accessible to its police. Okay? So, again, a very profound sentence. The totalitarian bureaucratic society lives in a perpetual present. Okay? And this is exactly the spectacle of the society that we are living in today. This is only the present. In the level that if you will want to talk to a person about what happened 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 100 years ago, it will be a burden for him. We are constantly bombarded by news. News. What happened today? What happens now? And there's only a present. In the conscious of people, there's no past. What happened in the past is just details. It's insignificant. It's narratives. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. How do I know? The only official channels that the mass majority of the people are connected to is the present. And this is a part of, you need to understand, this is a mode of consciousness that is unique to our postmodern world. In the past, it was not so. In the past, and not that I'm nostalgic or anything, I'm just trying to tell you that you need to understand that this is a manufactured mode of thinking for the mass societies. This spectacular mode of consciousness. Because if you would go to the past, and again, it's not about being nostalgic, it's just about trying to explain and express that the way in which people are being educated to think in our postmodern society is a manufactured mode of thinking. Because if you will go to earlier societies than ours, you will see that they definitely had a past. The connection with the past was an organic, living connection, right? It's not so today. nations had their history, nations had their traditions, nations had more conscious weight over what happened in the past rather than what happens now. The past was very active, was very present in the present, right? Whether it's through religious thought or traditional thought or familial thought, tribe thought, right? The past has accumulated a big part in the consciousness of people in the past. Today, our society teaches us to erase any kind of consciousness, historical consciousness. Why? Because it is easier to control and dominate people in such a way. And this is part of what I've began with, is that exactly the institutions that were the responsibility for giving us a historical consciousness was deposited in their hands are exactly the ones doing that. And that is the universities and the academies. A person goes today to the academy, doesn't study history. He studies about all sorts of indoctrination, about who knows what. Can you go to a graduate student today and ask him about who was the emperor of the Roman Empire in this year? No. But how many? And again, I have nothing against gender studies, nothing. But you see, the situation is opposite than what it was in the past. He can summarize for you the 20 different kinds of genders. Let's see. The project already formulated by Napoleon, the ruler directing the energy of memory, has found its own total concretization in a permanent manipulation of the past. Not only of meanings, but of facts as well. Okay? The average person will think that this is impossible. It cannot be that the current institutions of thought are tampering with facts of history. But I can tell you they do. I can tell you they do. Definitely they do. And if you will listen to the broadcast about From Crossroads to Islam, hopefully we will be able to translate them, but it will take some time. You will see that history is definitely tampered with on level of facts. Really of facts. Certain, let's say, historical evidence that is not aligned with the current interpretation of history are censored, are being put away, and certain documents are tampered with, really are really simply mispresented. You know what? I will give you an example. I will give you an example in one moment. Just one example to show you to which extent it goes. But the second thing that occurs here in this sentence is a quote from Napoleon. Napoleon quoted that the victors, the ones that is victorious, they are the ones that will write history. And in Israel, we know this sentence also very well, not in the name of Napoleon, but in the name of one of the early politicians here. He says we control the media. In this case, it was the Israeli left. He said we control the media, and we will write the history. And it's not just in Israel; you see it everywhere. So let me give you an example. It's a tiny example, but it's a good one. Okay. Let's look at something interesting. First, Islamic coin. Okay? Hopefully I will be able to find it. Just a moment. Oh. This is something very interesting. Look at this. This is Nukwad gallery, okay? Cutting the past one coin at a time. We are a dealer and actioner of rare coins based in Dubai. Okay, so you will not suspect that they are biased in any way, right? But nevertheless, look at something very interesting. This is the way that the first Islamic coins are presented. Now, do you see anything unusual about this first Islamic coin? I mean, it should be a Muslim coin, right? So it should have verses maybe from the Quran. It should not have an image of a person on it because, for instance, not long ago, there was this Charlie Hebdo incident in France. It's already quite long ago, but that somebody drew a picture of supposedly drew a picture of Muhammad, and it was considered un-Islamic, right? So who is this person on this picture? It's clearly not Muhammad. Who is he? And why is there no Islamic symbols on it? So remarkably, what you see is that when you go to the academy today and you are being taught archaeology, they have the nerve of telling you that this is the first Islamic coin. But it's not an Islamic coin. It's a Parisian coin. It's a coin from the King Khosrow II. Okay. The Sasanic Empire. Okay. So let me try to show you their coins. You see, that's the way their coins looked like, the coins of the Sasanian Empire. Yeah? So how can the first Islamic coin be a Parisian Sasanic coin? Can you get me an answer for that from a history professor? Let's ask Yuval Noah Harari. He doesn't care for these things. He, like Obama said, he looks from a bird's eye. Right? He looks from a bird's eye. Yeah, these details, these coins, it doesn't matter. You see, this presentation of the first Islamic coin, it leads to questions. It leads to serious questions about whether the way history is presented to us is really aligned with the true history and the way that things evolved. And there's answers, but for the bureaucratic society, I'm not talking about the Muslim society. I'm not talking about that it's necessarily the Muslims that don't want this question raised. It's the bureaucratic institutions by themselves that don't want the questions asked. Because you see, the bureaucracy, especially through the control over the academy, and by that the control over knowledge, they practice their control by the fact that they are the authority. And questions are not good for the authority. The more details you have, the more room for questions you have. And therefore, it's not coincidence that in the 21st century, Obama and Bill Gates and all this lovely pack advertise such a superficial version of history like Yuval Noah Harari. Because you cannot ask really questions about Homo sapiens. Okay, fine. So Homo sapiens went here and there and there and there. There's no details. But imagine that you will be in a lecture room and you will learn I'm just giving an example here of the first Islamic coin. For all I care, it could be some other example. It's not necessarily about that. It's just something that came to mind. And you will come to a professor and he will show you this coin. And somebody in the crowd will raise a hand and say, but dear professor, this is cannot be an Islamic coin. It's a Parisian coin. It shows the image of King Khosrow II or Khosrow I that, with all due respect, has pagan symbols on it. So how can it be an Islamic coin? And you see, once you will poke in such a way the authority of the bureaucratic institution, if you have undermined its authority in one place, you undermine all of its authority. It needs to protect itself completely from any kind of confrontation against its authority. And therefore, it's not just details for them, it's everything. And therefore, paradoxically, these kind of institutions that were supposed to transfer all of human knowledge are now actually conniving and manipulating how to create a system that is supposedly educational, but actually is more invested in pushing you away from asking questions in order not to undermine the absolute authority that they have. Very brilliant the way that they have produced figures like Yuval Noah Harari. It's a spectacle. It's a spectacle. It's society of the spectacle. Spectacle of an intellectual. A spectacle of a historian. Spectacular historian. It's just a spectacle. Obama said it's true. Bill Gates said it's true. Klaus Schwab said it's true. The World Economic Forum said it's true. So it must be true. It's a mass hypnosis. What is this history? Yeah, let's throw away the history of the ancient world, the history of Napoleon, the history of the Roman Empire, the history of medieval Europe. All of this is just it's details. Homo sapiens, who cares? Yeah, that's why we need to make this kind of broadcasts on the underground. Do you happen to think that Bill Gates will one day advertise the kind of broadcast that we are doing on Crossroads on Islam, Crossroads to Islam? I don't think so. Do you think Obama will? I don't think so. Is it just because of our accent? I don't think so. It's a political matter. It's a war. It's a war between the most superficial to the most profound things. And the most profound things has been exiled from the same institutions that should have accommodated them. You see, the academy doesn't need to be defunded. You should only fund the things that have been already defunded to begin with today. And once this will happen, miracles will start happening around us. People will be amazed from the amount of information, valuable information, that has been kept censored. Say, where can you study a course about these aspects of society of the spectacle? In the university? The academy will tell you that they are by themselves rewriting history? I don't think so. But the price paid for this emancipation from all historical reality is the loss of rational reference, which is indispensable to the historical society. Capitalism. So actually, Debord is now the protector of good old-fashioned capitalism. He says, you know, if you will go to Wikipedia, Debord will be presented to you as a neo-Marxist. But he actually says, even good old-fashioned capitalism is far better than the society of the spectacle of the bureaucratic dictatorship. Because the bureaucratic dictatorship is insane. Is insane. And that is why, at the end of the day, the American society is doing exactly what Debord predicted. He predicted that once the dictatorship, the bureaucratic dictatorship will have its way, society will run as fast as they can back to the loving hands of the order of actually of capitalism. That is why, remarkably, today, as I said in the beginning, the heroes of the protectors of humanity are Donald Trump and Elon Musk, which are the biggest capitalists. The biggest billionaires in America are the champions to protect society from the bureaucratic dictatorship. It's no coincidence that this is so. Because the bureaucratic dictatorship is bad for business. It's bad for business for everybody. Why? Because it's insane. It cannot function. Society cannot function for long at the hands of such idiots. It can't. It just can't. You understand? The point is, for instance, a country like mine, a country like Israel, if the official institutions of Israel, of the state of Israel, the Hebrew University, right? Just think of the paradox. Have now erased the history of the Jewish nation, for instance. And I'm not talking from a religious point of view. I'm talking like, just look at the paradox. So how do you justify the existence of the state at all? You understand, figures like Yuval Noah Harari are going counter to all the idea. It's like the image of the black holes that I gave you. If really it's all about Homo sapiens, then why having a Jewish state at all? Why? And again, I'm not advocating for any kind of thing here. It's much more profound than that. I'm not here coming to make a stance about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and whether the Jews have the right for the state. And forget about it, not the subject here. And if you would listen to our podcasts, you will see that we have a completely different worldview on all this matter. But there is a deep historical roots here to all the area, to the Palestinians, to the Jews, to the Israelis, to a lot of history, right? But once you take all of this history, throw it out of the window, then what is all of this? And then when the 7th of October happened, Yuval Noah Harari was shocked, was amazed, was startled. But you and the likes of you have part in this. Right? It's not rational. It's an inner paradox. You cannot have a society that wants absolute control and then erases human history. You cannot have that. And also it's bad for business. It is known how much the scientific application of insane ideology has cost the Russian economy. If only through the imposter of Lysenko. It's an amazing example that he gives here. He says, look what happened in the mother, in the original mother of all the bureaucratic dictatorships, the mother womb in Soviet Russia. They already prepared for us an example of how insane bureaucratic dictatorships can be. And they gave here a very interesting example. Okay, the example of Lysenko. Okay, Lysenko was a remarkable figure in Soviet history. Okay, Trofim Lysenko. You see this charismatic figure. Now, the point with him is that he was a pseudoscientist. Okay, and KVD and so on. And you see, he was not a good scientist. He was actually a very shitty scientist. But he was good friends with Stalin. Okay, Stalin liked him. Stalin very much appreciated him. He was friend of the party. So in the bureaucratic democracy, dictatorship, what is more important? If you're a high-ranking bureaucrat or if you are a scientific figure. Of course, if you're a high-ranking bureaucrat, then you're like God. You can do whatever you want. So Stalin deposited in his hands the responsibility over all of Russian agricultural research to do whatever he wanted. Now, this exemplar did not believe in Western biology. So what he done? He applied his theory all over Soviet Russia for the growing of crops. And it failed miserably. what is the implications of this miserable failure? That the whole state of Soviet Russia didn't have what to eat for a few years. And people died by the millions in starvation because they didn't have crops. Okay? That's what happened when you let bureaucrats handle scientific matters. You let them deal with things that they are not qualified to handle with. So this is the example of Trofim Lysenko, a very fascinating example. You see, was a Soviet agronomist. He rejected Mendelian genetics in favor of his own pseudo-scientific ideas. Lysenkonism. Really, really fascinating part in history. Now, why am I telling you this? Because it's exactly what we see in our postmodern society today. You think it's not, but it happened. Should I remind you what happened here in the years of 2019 to 2021? What was all this pandemic babble, this brainwash that people were under? And today, the current administration tells it very bluntly. It was a fraud. That's what happens when you let bureaucrats have unlimited power. And then they tell you, trust the science, the scientists say, and so on. Fauci, Anthony Fauci, is the Lysenko of our time. Okay? And wait and see what will come out about all these vaccinations and all this insanity that went on. Because you see, the bureaucrats, they view themselves as God. They view themselves as the highest authority. It doesn't matter if they say something is science, then it is science. Very simple. And you need to trust them and believe them and follow them as if they are the high priesthood. Whatever they say is the word of God in their eyes. They are science. What happened? Because of this fake pandemic, what did they do? They demolished economy. They demolished the global economy, right? They literally blocked and put the whole world into quarantines for a few years. Businesses were demolished, complete destruction of the economy. People lost their jobs, lost their lives, lost their livelihood. This doesn't matter as long as we protect from the pandemic. But where was this pandemic? If speaking about trust the science, there's a very simple science called statistics. According to statistics, if there is a pandemic, you don't need to see it on the television. You don't need to trust the science that it exists. If you have, I have in my Facebook 3,000 people. Around 3,000 friends. Not a lot. 3,000. 3,000 is well enough to tell you as a test group if there is a pandemic or not. If you see people in your Facebook hospitalized, mentioning that people died in their circle and so on, I didn't see that. And that's science the way I know it. On the contrary, I saw things just fine. Some people told me they had something flu-like and so on, but not more than that. For comparison, when in our country this horrible event of the 7th of October happened, we saw the implications. We saw them. We heard of funerals, we heard of people dying, we heard horrible things from all over. So anyway, spectacular science, society of the spectacle. Lysenko. The contradiction of the totalitarian bureaucracy administrating an industrialized society caught between its need for rationality and its rejection of the rational is one of the main deficiencies with regard to normal capitalist development. So he says, in translation, he says the following thing. The bureaucrats administrating by the totalitarian administration the society are insane. They are driving society to insanity. They are completely irrational. Rationality is their enemy, actually. True science is their enemy. True advancement is their enemy. They are blocking any kind of true advancement, true science, true development, true history. By the way, this abolishment and superficialization of history also occurs in science. Don't think. We have superficial physics, we have superficial mathematics. The university does not bring out as a conscious decision, they do not bring out substantial discoveries. And you know, not long ago there was an interview of one of the founders of OpenAI, and he got interviewed in one of the academies here. And they asked him, what did the academy contribute for the development of systems like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, and so on? And he says nothing. But you think that it's because they technically cannot? They can. But the institution, the bureaucracy, took a conscious decision to block any kind of advancement. What's the problem? The problem is that the modern systems that we have inherited, the capitalistic systems that we have inherited, demand rationality for their prolongation. You cannot be a complete retard and actually run the system. You can't. You will destroy it. You know, when was it in Syria? When the regime of Assad collapsed, there came out a picture of some of the rebels, and they found an old Russian chopper from the Assad military. So they went into YouTube and they tried to operate the chopper and went in and went and started flying the chopper. And of course, they could lift it up from the ground, but they couldn't land it. So they the chopper exploded with them. You cannot let idiots run a sophisticated, modern, rational system. You can't. And that's why the American state, the American people, wisely went SOS to elect people that actually have some sort of experience in actually running things in a modern society. Say whatever you want about Trump and Elon Musk, but they have an objective experience in running systems, in making business, in making rational decisions. Contrary to the bureaucrats that have not proven in any way that they're capable. And to these kind of people, you let run the show. And you saw the damages. So our luck is that the insane people are so insane that they're actually, once you give them to run things, they manifest their insanity to such a way that it is so evident, that it is so clear, that you just must take control away from their hands. So the bureaucratic dictatorship leads to its own demise. It shows its own fallacy. Just as the bureaucracy cannot resolve the question of agriculture the way capitalism has done, it is ultimately inferior to capitalism in industrial production, planned from the top and based on unreality and generalized falsehood. So it's just unbelievable. I mean, Guy Debord is marketed as a neo-Marxist. He's advocating here, he says, if you need to choose between the idiots of the bureaucratic dictatorship, like Stalin and Lysenko, or Fauci and Obama and Yuval Noah Harari, to capitalists, choose the capitalists. They will at least give you some abundance. You will get more abundance from them than you will get from the bureaucrats. So you see, we think that the current forces are right and left, political right and left. Yeah, and the bureaucratic dictatorship is the left. It's not. It's not. Guy Debord is telling you, I don't know these guys. I'm not with them. I'm maybe lefty, but I have nothing to do with the current bureaucratic dictatorship that is currently presented as the left. If you need to choose between the right and the left today, choose the right. At least they are capable of doing something. What is today marketed as left is not left anymore. It's just insanity. It's political insanity. It's a dictatorship. It's a bureaucratic dictatorship. And let's read this sentence again because it's just amazing. Just as the bureaucracy cannot resolve the question of agriculture the way capitalism is done, it is ultimately inferior to capitalism in industrial production. So if you want wealth, if you want prosperity, if you want abundance, the board tell you you're better off with capitalism than with this retardation. This is not in any way a lefty ideology. Biden, Obama, Yuval Noah Harari, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, they're not lefties. They are a new category all by its own. So the real political clash between, let's say, I don't know, Trump and Biden and Kamala Harris is not between right and left. Even the lefties, like Guy Debord, ultra radical left, because I prefer Trump over this other camp. I don't know who they are. I have no contact with them. They're not my friend. Unbelievable. So who would have imagined that we would come to a time that Guy Debord and Donald Trump and Elon Musk are somehow ideologically aligned, one with the other, but surprises never cease. So, have a good morning.